What's up, Canes fans? Welcome to the Canes Insight Daily Podcast, Baseball Edition, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Finally got a win to talk about, a series win, a road series win at that. So we're bringing in Mr. Perfect, Javi Salas, as always, to break that down. But first, let's hear a word from some of the best friends that Canes baseball has.
This episode of the Canes Insight podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sala Astorita & Cox, a boutique law firm focusing on securities regulatory matters, broker-dealer and investment advisor regulation, white-collar criminal defense, complex commercial litigation, and securities arbitration and litigation. The firm aggressively represents clients throughout the nation. Contact them now at 561-989-9080 or visit them online at salalaw.com.
All right, let's get into it. A series win, a road series win. Finally, some good news. There's been some depressing podcasts. Javi, talk about a win for once. How you feeling?
Good, man. Good to be back. Good to be talking from a winner's perspective, D. I think it's been a long time coming. Obviously, first ACC series win in a long time. ACC series win on the road in Blacksburg. Not the best place to play. Weather wasn't all that great, but nice to see the guys bounce back after that midweek loss against FIU and take a series for the good guys.
No, absolutely. That FIU, that was really kind of a low point of the season. I mean, there's been some low points, but that felt like sort of the bottom. So you hope that you can finish strong and not end on that note, right? What does that mean in terms of you played on teams that, the end of the season feeds into the next year? Or is it just, momentum is how your offseason is? How's that work?
Momentum is next day's starting pitcher, right? So, obviously Miami, the FIU loss stings. It's tough. We've had our struggles in state all year long. And, obviously the series to Florida, losing to Florida State. We've had our troubles in the midweeks, which is, in-state opponents usually. So, it's a 4-game set with FIU. Miami's won 2. FIU gets their licks in Coral Gables last week. They'll have the opportunity now on Tuesday to play one more at FIU. But, that loss kind of spoke to some of the talent gap that Miami's experiencing. The midweek starting pitcher role has kind of been a toss-up. We haven't had one guy that's really taken the bull by the horns, and you fall behind early to FIU, and they did a nice job, keeping Miami at bay and keeping the game at a distance. And look, ultimately, tough loss, low point, never want to lose to a crosstown rival, but a nice bounce back. And I think that's, the positive we can probably draw out of this. Obviously, it's been a tough year. We haven't had the ACC series success that we'd hoped we'd have, especially with the start we had, but nice to see the team bounce back in Blacksburg for sure.
Yeah, look, the big takeaway going forward has to be Daniel Cuvée. We talked about it the last few weeks in terms of his ability to adjust, but it's amazing that we had a period here where we were talking about him having to adjust ACC pitching, obviously tearing up non-conference and then having some struggles in the ACC. Now you see an ACC team giving him the Barry Bonds treatment after he just went for 3 homers and a limited amount of at-bats. So where are you at on Daniel Cuvée after this past weekend?
I've been high on Cuvée since day one. I think, that's last week I made a point to his post-game presser against BYU where he said he acknowledged the struggles. He acknowledged that he had a period where he needed to adjust. People were pitching to him differently. And I think it just speaks to the kid's maturity, right? At 18 years old, he's the best player on our team. When he plays like Daniel Cuvée and he hits home runs all over the park, Miami's got the best player on the field and they got a really good chance to win. So I'm shocked. The pitcher in me says, why are people still throwing to him? Why are they throwing him fastballs? I love the player that he's become, the maturity he's shown throughout the entire season. And then you get in that battle like Friday night, you're facing the team's ace, Virginia Tech's ace. It's a fastball on a 3-0 count, deposits it off the center field, hitter's eye, right? So it's like this guy is the real deal. He's showing up to these big-time series in ACC play, knowing that he's the best player, knowing he's not protected by Jason Torres and Blake Sear anymore, knowing he's not going to get very many pitches to hit. He still does damage. It's box office kind of stuff. It's the kind of stuff you want to see in a Miami uniform, and I'm excited for year 2 and year 3 to see where what his real ceiling is at this point.
Yeah, compare him to Drew Burris, the other ACC freshman from Georgia Tech who's hitting a ton of homers. Feels like Cuvé's just go a lot further. Yeah. I mean, they're out of any park. They're not just the small parks.
Look, last week, 450, dead center at Mark Light Stadium off a pitcher of BYU. This week, both of them 440-foot range, exit velos over 110. So these balls are not only going far, they're hit super hard. super high trajectory. These are like, the natural kind of home runs. It's like, it's incredible. And look, baseball has shifted where everyone is trying to pull the ball. They're trying to hit it out to left field or right field if you're left-handed. Cuvier's hitting the ball all over the field. We've seen homers to right. We've seen homers off his face in the scoreboard at Marklight Stadium, homers off the hitter's eye. So this guy's a real deal. Again, I don't know why pitchers are throwing to him. There's going to be a point where it's just not going to be realistic to throw to Daniel Cavetti anymore. But you see the progression of a freshman, right? He knows he's not getting pitches to hit. So what does he do? He gets a 3-0 count, zones in on fastball, gets a fastball he can hit, and doesn't miss it. That, as a pitcher, that's what I worry about. I worry about guys that are uber aggressive, guys that can do damage, guys that are wanting to do damage. If I throw a 3-1 strike and it's a take, I'm right back in the count. I can really go with any pitch. At 3-0, having a guy that is aggressive, a crazy hitter like that, where the power jumps off the charts, the maturity jumps off the charts, and then looking at the lineup, I'm thinking to myself, this is a really only guy that can beat me is Daniel Cavetti. And then you see the 3 walks, right? There's a reason why they walked him 3 times the rest of the weekend. They weren't going to deal with him. They said, we've had enough of this guy. Virginia Tech put up the white surrender flag, no mas kind of thing. Let's let somebody else beat us.
And part of this is bringing enough protection for Daniel Cavetti. So going forward, that becomes a riskier strategy. I look at Virginia Tech, and we've been looking at opponents to figure out kind of Miami's transfer portal strategy. Obviously, JD came in later in the period, I think in early August. So portal been open for several months, behind the 8 ball there. Now you get a full portal period, and you see Clemson, FSU, teams we've talked about doing it the right way. I look at Virginia Tech and I see Eddie Micheletti, George Washington, transfer, OPS 1117, Ben Watson from Elizabethtown, wherever that is, 1079. And both these guys, they're raking in the ACC coming from small schools. So you who pitched against all kinds of schools, compared hitters, how to prepare. What's the difference between some of these top hitters at smaller schools and your average ACC hitter?
Well, you look at what Daniel Cavetti is going through, right, where he's the focal point of this lineup. That's probably what these top hitters at smaller schools, that what they go through, right? You look at, granted, baseball is great everywhere. Let's put that out there. I think it's really important that there's great D2 players, there's great players in D3. They're just looking to make the jump, and I think this transfer portal NIL era has sort of opened everyone's horizons with, hey, we can get our team better with really quality guys really quickly, right? We saw Florida State last year. Florida State is bottom of the ACC. Link Jarrett's first year, struggled like crazy, 9 wins in the conference, last place in the ACC. They're going to be a national seed in a couple of weeks here, right? They're going to host a regional in Tallahassee, which is just a crazy turnaround. Like this is something that obviously coaches have not experienced before, but it's available to us. The course has been charted. I mean, you don't have to look far. Look at Florida State, look at Clemson, Virginia Tech, and reaping the benefits of widening your search and expanding your horizons to players, not just at the high school level, but at the collegiate level, junior college level. There's so much good baseball being played out there. So, I anticipate Miami's going to be aggressive. I anticipate that they're going to start looking at some of the programs, maybe that they played against, some of the smaller schools in the area. Miami's still Miami. I mean, Miami carries a lot of weight in baseball at the collegiate level. Guys understand that Miami produces a ton of talent. I mean, come on, we're in South Florida, man. The weather's great all the time of the year. I can guarantee you the guy from Elizabethtown College, wherever that is, they probably didn't have a great winter. I can imagine. It's probably not in the South. So there's going to be the ability and availability of a lot of guys to sort of shore up this lineup in a quick manner. I think, Miami just has to be aggressive in that sense, understand the needs, understand where we need to get better, understand how we surround the players next year, and elevate the talent level, elevate, I always think about it, the too deep in football, right? You want to have that second tier of player also, raise the floor of your team. So there's a lot of good baseball out there from my perspective. I played summer ball. That's one of the great barometers of sort of talent because you get guys from all over the country, small school, big school. I played in the Virginia Valley League, which was a very competitive league. We had guys from everywhere, D2s, D3s that absolutely raked. The middle of our lineup, we had guys from Power 5s. And then we had the third hitter, maybe from a random school in North Carolina that wasn't one of our best players, right? So my eyes were open to how good the level of baseball is everywhere. Just Miami's got to be aggressive, go out and find those diamonds in the rough, and go after some guys that are at some bigger programs that do want to play at Miami. I think those are going to be more available than we think.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun off season. Part of it also is identifying, what you talked about last week, identifying the guys that maybe can help you going forward.
Right.
Miles Cobb is a guy that he had some ups and downs, but had a nice weekend this weekend. Yeah,
really nice weekend. I think definitely one of those. I talked about a couple of weeks ago, the last 10 or so games of the season it's a good evaluation point. I think, you talk about professional teams, they look at trends a lot. They want to go last 10 games, last 15 games. there's a good enough sample size to understand, hey, this is a good evaluation point for our roster. See what we have. I really liked what I saw out of Miles Cabo. Obviously, the best performance of his career at Miami, a guy who dealt with a lot of injuries, has bounced back, has seen his ups and downs, but pitched in a really high leverage situation. I like the fact that they let him go. They let him finish the game, ride the hot hand. I'm a big believer that once a pitcher's in a groove, what we've seen out of Miami, there's not a lot of, you have to save the guys that we do have. Pitches on Friday night. He's probably not going to pitch again the rest of the weekend. Just let him go, ride the horse until he can't go anymore. And he did that. He did just that. And tremendous outing on Friday night. Similar to Nick Robert on Saturday. We saw him go 50 plus pitches. I can't imagine, I don't have the data in front of me, but I can't imagine Nick has had that many pitches in an outing this year. But again, let your guys go. Let them experience the ups and downs of going multiple innings and closing out a tight game like that in the conference.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Nick because you've talked about him being a potential starter down the road.
Yeah.
So what are the things, if you're looking at a relief pitcher, and you always say, everybody's a starter in high school when they come in. So someone who's in the relief role at Miami, what are the characteristics you look for to say this guy could be a starter going forward?
Yeah, I think, Robert's stuff profiles to me as a starter. He's got a heavy sinking fastball. Not a whole lot of strikeout, not a lot of swing and miss just yet. I think as a freshman, he was thrust into a really tough situation early on in the season. Wasn't the opening day closer, found his way into the closing role just because of some moving parts, and he pitched well at the beginning of the season. And at that point, you're kind of just surviving. You're not necessarily trying to, develop pitches when you're a closer. You're just trying to get the last 3 outs of the game, go into the dugout and, put on some music and celebrate a win, right? So I think Nick Roberts going to benefit from an offseason knowing like, hey, I'm going to have this defined role, whether that's a starter or a reliever. My personal opinion, I think he's a starter. I think his stuff profiles more as a starter. He's a big guy, good sinking fastball, has the ability to throw a good breaking ball. I see him working on the changeup. He has an advanced feel for a changeup, which is nice to see as a freshman. So I think he's a guy that's going to have a good offseason plan, and they should, identify early on, hey, you're either going to be a starter, you're going to be a reliever, so he can go into his offseason confident, understanding what his plan is, understand I need to go and do X, Y, Z. So when I show up in August, my body feels like this, my arm is at this position. There's just so much a different comparative offseason between a starter and a reliever. So, in my opinion, Nick Robert is a starter going forward. I don't know how the staff sees it right now, but I'm sure those conversations are going to start happening here in the next couple of weeks as the season winds down.
Could this be a situation where Miami is able to win the last 4 games, maybe win a couple tournament games and get over that 500 line? Is that something that's talked about? I mean, they're between 23 and 27, right?
Yeah.
So you got 3 games against Pitt, a game against FIU, and then the tournament. I mean, is that something you think people are thinking about? Obviously, they weren't around in 1950 or 8 or whatever the last losing season was. Is that, you think that's on their minds?
In baseball, you never want to look ahead, right? I think the totality of the season, obviously, no one's happy with the results. Obviously, I think we've spoken at length on the show here, and talking to fans and players around the program. No one is happy with an under 500 season. I think Miami we've been spoiled as a program to understand what it's like to be at the mountaintop, the 4 national championships, the trips to Omaha year in and year out. I remember growing up, it was like, okay, we're going to watch baseball into June because Miami's going to be playing in Omaha, right? So, obviously, this is some uncharted territory for the program. And look, I think the next 4 to 6 games, you have 6 games guaranteed. If you make the tournament, you have the 2 games. So there's an opportunity to go over 500. Miami's got to beat FIU on Tuesday, right? Like that's got to be like, I know it's coach talk. I know it's coach speak, but you got to, the closest alligator to the boat. Let's take care of that one, right? And that's FIU. And then you see where the chips fall where they may, right? Pitt is going to come in super hungry because it's going to be Miami and Pitt for that final spot in the tournament, it looks like. So Miami right now has a 2-game lead on Pitt. You win 1, and then you got that opportunity to go to Charlotte for the tournament. And then the next order of business is, hey, we go to Charlotte. Now we got to win the whole thing if we really want to, continue our season and play in a regional. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot going on. Obviously, win the game on Tuesday, then you figure out Pitt on Thursday, and then you go from there. As a fan and as a former player, I'd love to see them get over 500. I think that'll be a nice feather in the cap. It's not what people want to hear. I know that, but the way the season was, where we're at right now, that's sort of our biggest achievement, is to try and get over that hump at 500.
HERK Hernandez, he's somebody that when you look at the strikeout numbers, I mean, he's right there towards the top of the ACC. Hasn't had the results I don't think he wants, up and down. We've talked about it, but now that we've got a lot of data on him at this point. what's the next step for him to become not just somebody who can strike people out, but somebody who can give you a chance to win every time he steps up?
Yeah, and HERK's in a position where, you know, in a normal season, I don't want to say normal season, in another year, another Miami staff, HERK might not be thrust into that Sunday role. We spoke early on in the season about HERK playing outfield at the high school level. A year at Miami-Dade College was basically his first year pitching, right? He didn't necessarily have a whole track record of you know, pitching on the mound and understanding how to get guys out. And I think when you make that jump to a starting pitcher, it's a tough jump, because number one, you have to go out there every 5 days, or in college it's every 7 days, give your team a chance to win. And we've seen HERK flash incredible stuff, right? You talked about the strikeout numbers. You talked about him having stuff that plays at the collegiate level. We've just seen him be, you know, susceptible to the long ball. You see a lot of doubles and triples, a lot of extra base hits off HERK. He's got to learn how to get, you know, he's got to get better. I think if he's going to be coming back next year, I don't know if that's a starter, as a reliever. Obviously, these are all conversations that are going to start happening sooner rather than later. It's about taking the next step. It's okay, you have good stuff, people swing and miss, but at the same time, it's like a, you know, Jekyll and Hyde, where, you know, people hit the ball really hard off you, susceptible to the long ball. I've seen, you know, maybe HERK is not necessarily great at putting guys away. Obviously strikes out guys, whiffs are there, but when you have hitters in hitters counts, that's when he really gets hurt. So it's like, how do we take the next step as a player, HERK? And that's where the player evaluation, player development, you develop a plan in the offseason. That's, as a starting pitcher, you can get excited about that stuff, because you know HERK's going to be looking at those numbers. He's going to know exactly where he got hit, what happened, what was his downfall, and that's something you can all work on, right? It's like Miami has the data, they have the facilities now, they have a pitching lab where he could spend the summer developing pitches, working on tunneling, working on, you know, pitch shape and pitch form and all this kind of stuff, where this is all tremendous stuff. Miami's at the cutting edge of all this stuff, right? So it's like, there's no excuse anymore. If you have a good plan going into an offseason, you could really change the outlook of your career really quickly.
Obviously, going the home stretch here, Miami's only chance to make the tournament is a puncher's chance, you know, winning the ACC tournament, basically. We've talked about, you know, certain instances where Miami's trying to scratch out wins the best way they can. We saw Daniel Cuvée hit a home run on a 3-0 count. Is this the time to really kind of crank it up as far as playing to win and kind of just letting the chips fall where they may?
I think so. They really got nothing to lose. I mean, because if you look at, we just talked about the 500 metric, that's great, right? You make it to 500. It's, you know, it's not necessarily a record, but it'd be the first team that in whatever, you know, 60 something plus years that didn't, you know, finish over 500. But Miami's got nothing to lose. They got Pitt. Obviously, you got to win a couple games there to get into the tournament. But then you get to the tournament, they're going to be the 12th seed probably, right? So they're going to face off either against Clemson or Carolina in that first game, the 1-12 matchup. Carolina and Clemson don't have a whole lot to play for. They're probably locked in as national seeds. They know they're going to host a regional at their home park. So, you know, at this point, you kind of let the fur fly. You understand that, you know, Miami, like I said, they don't have much to lose at this juncture in the season. You don't necessarily want to let a team like Miami get all that hot going into a tournament play like this. The ACC tournament is super wonky. It's 4 pools of 3 teams. It's super hard to understand who advances. So Miami's got to win their pool to advance. That's, you know, we know that already. Then they got to win the semifinal game. They got to win the final game. So we're talking about winning 4 games in, you know, 4.5, 5 days to advance. And obviously not an easy task, but I'm saying if I'm Clemson or Carolina, I wouldn't want to face a team that, like you said, has a puncher's chance. They're going to be playing really loose just to win another day and happy to see another day of baseball. So it's a slim chance. The road is winding and narrow and it's uphill and it's tough, but there is a chance. And I think, you know, obviously, like I said, take care of business against FIU, go into that weekend series against Pitt, secure your spot in the tournament, and then see what happens. Yeah,
you mentioned North Carolina. I was there when Blake Sear hit 2 home runs. Miami won 14-1.
Yeah.
You know, and they just kind of ran him out of the game. Obviously, that was just a hot game, but like you said, you got a chance. No Blake Sear, which makes things a little trickier. But you play with the guys that are out there. One last guy I want to talk to you about, who close to my heart, Belen guy, Dorian Gonzalez. You mentioned he's either, is he at 9 or is he about to get to 10 or is he already at 10?
I think he's at 8. I mean, he's close. He's right there,
10,
right?
Yeah.
The first multi-home run game of his career on Friday night. And, you know, one thing about Dorian, right? I talk about not pitching to Daniel Cuvée, and as a pitcher, I wouldn't throw Daniel Cuvée, but you have Dorian Gonzalez hitting behind him who hits 2 home runs too. So as a pitching coach, you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm getting beat by the best guy on the field. Then I'm getting beat by the number 4 guy on the field that, you know, obviously doesn't look like a number 4 hitter, but he's playing, well above his what we projected, right? I think he's done really well in that role. Team captain, just a solidifying sort of an anchor for this team, right? I think Dorian is not going to wow you with his athletic ability, but he hits the ball hard. He hits the ball all over the field. We saw the home runs the opposite way. So got a lot of credit. He means a lot to the program. Obviously, he's a Belen guy, so he's near and dear to your heart. So tremendous year for Dorian. I do hope he gets to that 10 home run mark. That'll be cool to see. Like I said, we're going to be on some watches here the next couple of weeks. Obviously, the Cavey, the 23 homers with Pat Burrell. I can't imagine they're going to pitch for him this weekend, especially Pitt coming in as desperate as they are. But look, Cavey, Dorian, these guys have had some really nice seasons, and it'll be nice to see them at home finish out the year and hit some milestones.
Yeah, look, if you do inject some experienced bats into this lineup from the portal, a guy like Dorian maybe slides more into his natural role, but still brings you everything he brought you this year as far as his improvement, right? He slid him down a little bit. Now you got a really nice second baseman utility guy that can do more offensively than maybe we expected. Yeah, look, and Dorian's been key to some big time wins, right? We've seen Dorian hit the walk-off homer and then have a suicide squeeze bunt for a win, right? So he's a versatile guy who can do a lot for you. Obviously, the players and coaches think very highly of him as a captain. So, yes, to your point, infusing more talent will rise the tide and bring up that floor of the team. Have guys slot into the more natural spots. Look, we talk about this team as it is right now. We're missing Blake Sear. We're missing Jason Torres, both dealing with injuries. So those are two huge pieces of this lineup that obviously haven't been helpful in the last couple of weeks. And Miami's, ACC series struggles, but they're pieces that you're going to bring back next year, pieces you're going to inject into this lineup with the likes of Daniel Cavey. We're talking about these exterior, players that are out there in the portal that haven't necessarily entered yet, but there's going to be some movement and we anticipate that. So a lot, to be desired for Miami this year. I think obviously not the season we wanted, but it's going to be an exciting offseason to see how that player movement, really starts to play around here. All right. So I always ask you this question, these next 4 games, FIU and then the Pitt series, what do you want to see besides wins? What do you want to see on the field?
I think I want to see a little bit more what I saw on Friday and Saturday, which is a team that was, came out with some fire. I mean, we saw JD Arteaga get run out of the building on Friday. Obviously, admittedly, look, I'm not a big fan of umpires. That zone was really bad, I think, for both teams on Friday night. And I like to see it out of JD. I thought that was awesome. I think that it gave the team a lot of confidence. He came out and, told the umpire that he didn't appreciate his strike zone among some other things. And I think that the team responded. Obviously JD Urso got thrown out, but we saw Kaba really fired up on Friday night. Tremendous performance. Nick Roberts, same thing on Saturday night. Blacksburg is one of those places where it's just, I've played there, man. I don't love going to Blacksburg, Virginia. I don't think anyone really does. Like they have the turkey gobbles constantly. Like they used to have a cow pasture out in right field, and when the wind would blow in, I mean, you can imagine what that smelled like. So, look, I like going to Virginia Tech and beating these guys. It was obviously a very emotional series. Virginia Tech, they came down to Miami last year and beat us. So, nice to get a win. Team seemed fired up. It seemed rejuvenated. They were fighting. The game on Sunday, kind of throw it out the window. That was, you don't get good starting pitching. It's tough to win any game in conference. So, I'd like to see the team come out. Again, we mentioned it. Just play like there's no tomorrow. There really is no tomorrow. There's nothing to lose. Play free, play fast. Let Daniel Cavey swing at 3-0 pitches and try and do some damage. I think you want to really pummel Pitt. Go into the ACC tournament as the wild card. Again, no one wants to fight the crazy guy. If these guys are crazy enough to think they have a chance to win with the best player in Daniel Cavey, who knows?
Listen, hope we have another fun one next Monday. We'll be back. Appreciate you as always. Stay tuned. Go to the CanesInsight.com forums, Canes Baseball. If you're not out there already, the most active Canes baseball community on the internet. So again, Javi, man, appreciate you.
Thanks, D. Go Canes.
Go Canes.